Hey everyone, welcome to Question Period Rewind. I'm Donna Skelly, the Speaker of the Legislative Assembly of Ontario. Let's go back to 1986. That's the year when the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inducted its first batch of musicians. Among them, the iconic Ray Charles, Buddy Holly, and of course, Elvis Presley. Tina Turner was also receiving praise in California, where her star on Hollywood's Walk of Fame was revealed. And if you turned on the radio, there's a good chance you'd hear Madonna's #1 hit, Papa Don't Preach. But now, let's tune into the conversations the MPPs were having in Question Period.
Oral questions. The Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, my question today is for, he'll be pleased to know, the Attorney General. The question relates to the now famous Berth Jorgensen report, and it has come to light today that indeed in April of '86, the Advocacy Resource Center for the Handicapped and the Advocacy Center for the Elderly sponsored a conference focusing on issues relating obviously to the elderly and disabled. Apparently Ms. Jorgensen was on a panel discussing this very issue, violation of people's rights and institutions. It now turns out that Ms. Jorgensen herself gave a copy of her report to both a representative of the nursing homes branch of the Ministry of Health, and in fact, the legal counsel for the Ministry of Health was on the same panel with Ms. Jorgensen. It also appears that representatives from the Policy Development branch of the Attorney General's office were in attendance at the conference, and therefore they too would have gotten a copy of the report. How can you explain the reality that in both your ministry and the Ministry of Health, this report was put on a shelf somewhere, allowed to gather dust, and nothing whatever was done with the report?
Minister?
Mr. Speaker, I've made inquiries in my own ministry to determine when the report was received. I've read the report now. It speaks in a very general way about these important cases, and as you know, an investigation, as the Treasurer reported yesterday, is in the course of being conducted by the Ontario Provincial Police. I am making inquiries as to why the report was not brought to my attention or the attention of the Deputy Attorney General.
Supplementary.
Surely the Minister or the Attorney General will have to agree with me that the possibility of a successful action in this matter is obviously seriously hurt by the fact that there is now at least 6 months, if not more, between the events and the investigation being undertaken. I remind, too, the Minister that it is not only inappropriate, but out of keeping with all sense of ministerial responsibility for the Attorney General and his colleague, the Minister of Health, somehow to try and walk away from their responsibilities as heads of their departments. It is, I say with respect to the Attorney General, not adequate for he or his colleague to say, don't blame me, blame my staff, they didn't deliver it to me. My question to the Attorney General, therefore, is this: would he indicate to the House today that he and his colleague, the Minister of Health, are prepared to do what the Minister of Labour had to do when he found out in the Occupational Health Safety branch of his ministry that there obviously were some major shortcomings, and that is have someone conduct a complete investigation of the internal workings of both ministries?
Minister?
Right on. Mr. Speaker, I thank my honourable friend for his little lecture, which I will take to heart. The point of his question is whether there's any risk that prosecution will be made more difficult because of the delay. The reality is, if you read the report, you will see that the information that was used by the writer was received by the agents of concerned citizens on a confidential basis. We're making inquiries as to whether concerned friends are in a position to waive that confidentiality so an investigation can be conducted. If they are, an investigation will be conducted. If they are not prepared to waive confidentiality, it follows that we will not be able to interview any of the people who gave concerned friends that information. The other thing that is revealed is that concerned friends, in fact, advised the complainants to them that it would be inappropriate to go to the police force or investigative agencies with their complaints. That has produced a delay, and as the Leader of the Opposition will know, many of the complaints which concerned friends had are several years old. But we will do our best to see to it that the police conduct a full investigation in the circumstances.
Final supplementary.
Well, I say to the Attorney General, we must remember the fact that he, as the Chief Law Officer of the Crown, had a responsibility, which obviously through his ministry has been put in some jeopardy because of the maladministration inside his ministry, which caused a serious allegation not to be dealt with for some 6 months at the very least. I remind you that your colleague, the Minister of Health, admitted himself yesterday that the delay may make it difficult for police to investigate the allegations. I remind the Minister, too, that because of the Attorney General's own determination not to fill the Deputy Minister's position in his own ministry, there was a situation where you didn't have a full-time Deputy Minister, you had acting Deputy Ministers, for an extraordinary length of time. Therefore, I put it quite clearly, the Attorney General must bear some responsibility for his administrative decisions in not appointing a Deputy Minister, and he must always bear the full and direct responsibility for the inadequacies of the ministry he reports this House on in failing to bring to his attention
Minister.
the report.
Order.
My question, my question, therefore, to the Attorney General is, will you launch an investigation similar to the one launched by the Minister for Labour in terms of investigating administrative shortfalls in his ministry?
Minister. Good question.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I certainly don't know what to make of all that, but let me see if I can respond this way. The delay that the Minister of Health referred to in the press reports is a function, of course, of the fact that the complainants who complained to concerned friends did so in many cases several years ago. I think the most extreme case is 5 years before the matter came to light. That delay, there is no doubt, makes the investigation more difficult. It will quite conceivably have happened that many of the old people who were the objects of the complaint will have died in the intervening 5 years. The matter is made more difficult because concerned friends, who are in every way an excellent organization with whom I have met from time to time, thought it appropriate, and I don't quarrel with this, to accept these complaints on a completely confidential basis. I respect that, but it follows that that may, again, make the investigation difficult. The very investigation that the Leader of the Opposition is concerned about is going to take place, is indeed underway, and we will have to see what that investigation produces. On the subject of the Deputy Attorney General, who was acting Deputy Attorney General for some period of time, I regard it as a relatively, though not untypically, cheap shot to assert that he would not be able to administer the department effectively during the period of time when he was acting.
New question. New question. The member for Nipissing.
Everyone knows what you were up to. You're looking for a friend from Bay Street to put in that job.
That's right.
New question.
How many offers did you
Thank
put
you,
in?
Mr. Speaker. I have a question concerning the Minister of Northern Development's conference on northern competitiveness, and currently on in Sault Ste. Marie, to the Chairman of Management Board. The Chairman of our Northern Caucus, Jack Pierce, who is attending the conference, has indicated to us that the report which was prepared for the conference is a disgrace, it's out of date, it's completely inadequate, it fails to address the current economic problems facing the North. One of the reasons for this is undoubtedly your government's lack of understanding of the North, but perhaps another is a result of the fact that the government paid consultants from Southern Ontario to write the report. Could you explain why the government was unable to find qualified consultants in Northern Ontario who would have known what the real issues are in Northern Ontario?
Minister.
Well, I'll try to answer that, but I think I can understand why the honourable member from Fort Frances didn't think it was a good report, because he's a member of the opposition. I think the Premier and the Cabinet of Ontario have shown their good faith in establishing programs for Northern Ontario that our bona fides are accepted by any objective and reasonable observer, and that certainly there's no question that the people who prepared the report were capable and well motivated, and certainly as far as we're concerned, the report was a reasonable one.
Supplementary.
The chairman of Managed Board will know that this Southern report is an insult to Northerners. They know the problems that they're facing. You spend $164,000 in the South for a Southern report that still perpetrates the myth that the North will never be anything other than a collection of rocks and trees. The conference agenda, Mr. Minister, is a complete sham, and it appears as though the conference is nothing more than an elaborate public relations exercise. In view of that, I would like to ask the Minister if he can explain why the conference agenda hasn't addressed tourism, agriculture, secondary industries, or transportation. Any one of those.
Minister.
They don't understand it.
Well, I understand the conference is well attended by people from the North. The Premier and a number of cabinet ministers are there. I noticed that a good number of opposition members from both parties also attended, although most of them have returned now, and that's appropriate as well. But I certainly think that the agenda was appropriate, and that the Minister of Northern Affairs has indicated quite clearly, not only by his actions and the decisions of this government, backed up by the Treasury, but that in the long-range development of the North, in the long-range development, we are not as pessimistic as the honourable member has indicated.
Final supplementary.
You should listen to your own Minister of Northern Development and Mines. Yesterday, a gentleman in another hat, the Treasurer, fessed up to $800 million a year, or $400 million for 6 months. And you've admitted in this House on a number of occasions that the economic recovery which gave you that $800 million is not being shared equally in areas like Northern Ontario. Other than a piddling amount for roads, which still leaves you short with inflation index dollars of previous commitments for roads in the North, other than that, why was there nothing in your economic statement yesterday and nothing in your $800 million worth of money for Northern economic development, if you really want us to believe you are serious about the North?
Well, what the honourable member refers to a piddling amount, I'm not sure what kind of a cat he keeps at home, but the amount that is referred to in the statement yesterday actually gives the municipalities of Northern and Eastern Ontario a substantial leg up on the provision of new roads and municipal transportation. And we think it is quite appropriate, and I'm quite surprised that the honourable member isn't expressing the gratitude of his own municipality. Dogs that do that.
New question. New question, the member for York South.
Speaker, both my legs are on the floor, Mr. Speaker, and I don't have a cat at home. I have a question for the Treasurer. In the absence of the Minister of Health, we had to get from the OMA, not from the Minister of Health, who wouldn't provide it to us, a copy of the letter, the President's letter, which has gone out from the President of the Ontario Medical Association to members of the OMA with regard to the question of uninsured services. I'd like to ask the Treasurer whether, in light of that information, whether a doctor who has charged an individual in Thornhill $70 for storing medical charts for 7 years, because that's part of his uninsured services, and $30 for booking an outpatient's operation, whether he now feels that that would be covered by the letter from Dr. Railton to members of the profession.
Treasurer.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Health is attending a meeting of health ministers in Ottawa, and he provided me with a copy of a statement that I believe he made public there. It doesn't give the specific answer that the honourable member requests dealing with a specific doctor in a specific location. but I want to read just one paragraph. I'm quoting the Minister of Health. I'm encouraged by the OMA's position that standby charges and excessive administrative fees are unacceptable. The government agrees with the OMA that these extra fees are obstacles to insured services and thus must be considered in contravention of the Healthcare Accessibility Act. The government will fully reimburse patients for these extra charges and will take appropriate action against physicians who continue to bill in this matter. End of quote.
Supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, you've read very partially from the statement which I've also seen from the Minister of Health. The Minister has simply said that he will be reviewing the guidelines and he will be discussing them further with the OMA, and he says, I have some reservations about the OMA guidelines as contained in the letter. But I'd like to ask the Treasurer, patients aren't really helped by whether or not the Minister of Health has reservations. They have to deal with this problem every day. I'd like to ask the Treasurer in particular whether he thinks a professional rate of $30 for every 15 minutes is justified for the following services, as indicated in Dr. Railton's letter: telephone advice, doctor's certificates, e.g. back to school, consultations with allied health professionals, interviews with other paramedical organizations or others on behalf of a patient, case conference, and finally, interviews with relatives. I'd like to ask the Treasurer, does he not realize that as a result of this letter, not only is there not going to be a stop to the amount of additional charges that are going on, there is in fact going to be a flood of additional charges going on because they've now been officially sanctioned in a document signed by the President of the OMA.
Treasurer.
The honourable member asked for my opinion, and I really can't give it to him. I'm somewhat unreconstructed on matters of charges in many of the professions, as the Attorney General knows. But I do feel that the Minister of Health, in the statement that I quoted, has been quite specific that in those areas where extra charge is recognized, the full force of the authority of the Minister of Health will be brought to bear, and he has indicated reimbursement. And I don't see how he can be more definite than that.
Final supplementary, the member for Windsor Riverside.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to ask the House Leader, you will remember that during the debate on Bill 94, the Minister of Health indicated that one of the steps that resulted in Bill 94 was the fact that the Ontario Medical Association, in a deal that was struck by the former government in 1978, was unable to enforce any regulation or guidelines on any of its members. And therefore, the only way of controlling extra billing was to, in fact, bring in legislation. Would the House Leader for the government not understand that the only way that we're going to be able to stop these ridiculous charges for uninsured services is to amend Bill 94 in order to make it clear that doctors can't continue to impede accessibility to our healthcare system?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not prepared to agree with the honourable member that that's the only way that aim might be accomplished. I think the House is aware that negotiations with the OMA on a new fee schedule will have to be underway soon, since the original agreement or the previous agreement runs out in April of next year. It seems to me that those are matters that could be discussed, and it may well be that a professional agreement can be arrived at, and I'm quite hopeful that that will occur.
New question, the member for York South.
Mr. Speaker, I was at the conference yesterday and this morning in Sault Ste. Marie. The people of Ontario vote for political parties. They don't vote for government by consultants, and what we've seen over the last 2 days has been government by Coopers and Lybrand. But I'd like to really ask a question to the Treasurer directly about the statement that he made yesterday. I wonder if the Treasurer could comment on what he thinks the impact would be on Northern Ontarians who are, very much by their own statements and even by statements made by the government, living in a different Ontario from the one in the South. How do you think they're going to respond to your statement yesterday, which says, and I quote, "Part of the increased revenue has been allotted for such priority funding as agricultural support programs, healthcare programs, and capital for economic development projects, such as the GM Suzuki assembly plant in Ingersoll, as well as infrastructure for the Toyota assembly plant in Cambridge." Now, as a Treasurer, what kind of impact does he think that statement is going to have on a Northern Conference which gets this statement today is trying to understand what kind of priority the Government of Ontario attaches to development of the North. They got Coopers and Lybrand yesterday, which told them how bad things were and indicated nowhere to go in the future, and they've got this statement from the Treasurer arriving today indicating that the priorities for the government are in Ingersoll and Cambridge and not in Northern Ontario.
Treasurer.
I think the honourable member is misunderstanding the facts. The statements made by the government having to do with new programs in support of industry and economic growth in Northern Ontario were made at the time of the last budget. And these involved substantial funding of the Northern Development Fund, additional funding to assist especially hard-hit towns. I specifically mentioned Sault Ste. Marie, which is, yeah, all right, okay, that's fine. And that the funding that the honourable member is referred to are those special requirements for funding that have occurred since the budget. Those were decisions taken for the location, for example, of GM Suzuki. It also undertook the funding of additional forest fire fighting, additional funding for OHIP payments to doctors over and above what had been originally required, and the $400 million of additional funding that was referred to was not spent on increasing general programs, but specific payments that were required during the budgetary process.
Supplementary.
Speaker, the Treasurer can't get around the fact that he chose to make a statement yesterday, and he chose to indicate that he had extra money coming in because of what's happened, principally in terms of what's happened in Southern Ontario in terms of the increase in revenue and the increase in economic activity. He knows that even since his last budget, there have been layoffs announced in Sudbury, there have been layoffs announced in Thunder Bay, there have been layoffs announced in Smooth Rock Falls, there have been layoffs announced in Sault Ste. Marie, there are layoffs pending in community after community. That situation has, in fact, gotten worse since his last budget. Why was there no provision in the statement that he made yesterday that would deal with the crisis facing on Northern Ontario? Why was there nothing for the North in the statement that you made yesterday? Nothing at all.
Treasurer.
The honourable member is under the impression, I guess, that statement was some kind of a mini-budget. There were no new announcements of expenditure. If he is confusing in his mind my announcement of transfers to the universities and the municipalities, well, of course, there was additional funding there. I'm afraid the honourable Leader of the Opposition has got those two matters confused.
Final supplementary, the member for Port Arthur.
Speaker, now that the Treasurer has admitted that his statement yesterday, in spite of finding $405 million that he didn't expect in his budget, is nothing new, can he tell me what economic steps he and his government are going to take to ensure that the layoffs that have occurred over Northern Ontario of over 5,000 in the last year, those people are put back to work, because that's what they want to do.
Hear, hear. Treasurer.
Honourable member himself would know that the answer to that question is a difficult one. And one of the useful things that the government, headed by the Premier, who also is the Minister of Northern Development, is doing is he's up in the North meeting with Northerners as to achieving some answers to the question the honourable member is asking. We've listened to the suggestions from the members in opposition from the North, and their suggestions are not practical. But this conference that's being held in the North is a practical approach to finding out what the needs of the Northern community actually are and to act upon.
New question. The Leader of the Opposition.
My question, Mr. Speaker, is for the Minister responsible for women's issues.
Big day.
Who is?
Sure day, Ian.
Oh, Scott, the Attorney General, yes. If the Attorney General is prepared to accept these questions today, my question is with regard to the issue we raised yesterday. Yesterday, the Government House Leader acknowledged that it was possible to implement all of the narrow Bill 105 on pay equity in the public service by way of internal government regulation and simple implementation. We know of the Minister's commitment to pay equity for women in the public sector at least, and I wonder if the Minister would do his job as Minister responsible for women's issues and recommend to this House and to his colleague that immediate implementation occur.
Minister?
I suppose if I'm going to be the lead figure in the question period, from now on I'm going to get these little lectures. The reality is, whether I
Order. Order. Is there a doctor in the House? Order.
I suppose the problem is that I find these little lectures a little unctuous, and I'll just have to get used to it and do my best. But let me say to the honourable member that the government decided some months ago the way it was going to proceed with pay equity in the Ontario public service, the broader public sector, and the private sector. And it was decided, for reasons that were made plain at the time, that the OPS bill should be advanced first and should be advanced in the form of a bill, so that there would be recognition of the right that was being established by the bill, and so that those who were the beneficiaries of the bill would have not a regulation, but a statute as vindication of their right, making plain exactly what the benefits to be assigned to them by the legislature were. I think that was a sound decision for my own part, and I continue to do what I can to encourage the Minister of Labour to pursue it. I think it's the right policy. We will be introducing the bill for the broader public sector and the private sector in due course.
Hear, hear.
Supplementary?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I want to begin by apologizing to the Attorney General for having to require him to come to the legislature 3 or 4 times a week and hear the views of people other than himself.
We're sorry for the inconvenience.
I know you find it. I know you find cabinet more enjoyable where people worship at your feet and beg for an opportunity. but we have other responsibilities. One of those responsibilities we have over here. One of those responsibilities we have over here is to, instead of thanking you dearly for moving this far on public sector pay equity, as your colleagues do, we over here are here to represent the women of this province who are wondering why you won't move very far at all. My question, therefore...
Wait, Jim, wait. Just wait for
Question, order.
My question, therefore... My question...
Order. Question, please.
They'll hire you as an articling student after the election, don't worry. My question to the Attorney General, if he'll be so kind as to receive it, is this. Why will you not do what you have full and complete authority to do as a government, and that is say to the 29,000 women in the public service that they can have pay equity this week simply by putting through the appropriate arrangements at Cabinet tomorrow morning?
Minister?
Well, Mr. Speaker, first of all, let me accept the honourable member's kind apology, for which I'm grateful. I think I have been misunderstood. I didn't intend to convey that I objected to questions raised by the opposition or members of this House. It's only questions from the Leader of the Opposition. Now, I'm delighted to hear the Leader of the Opposition say that he's going to speak for the interests of women, and well, he should, because they can't even get on the executive of his political party.
Order.
And, Mr. Speaker,
Order. 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 I thought everything was so polite here for a while. Do you have a brief response, Minister?
Misinformed the House.
Point of privilege?
Misinformed the House.
Mr. Speaker, I rise on a point of privilege, and one that can quickly be corrected by the Attorney General in correcting the record in his accusation of the number of women. I think if you'll check, Mr. Attorney General, there are probably more women on the PC executive than there are several executives.
Order, that's not a point of privilege. Response?
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I wasn't trying to be contentious or difficult. I just took...
New question. The member for York South.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask a question of the Attorney General.
Oh, he won't answer. He won't answer.
But
May I?
It's a question that I think is partly of a factual nature. I honestly don't know whether the Attorney General knows the answer to this in the absence of the Minister of Health. But I'd like to ask him. He wasn't here, but he may recall that there have been, over a period of years, a number of different crackdowns announced at different times with respect to nursing homes. In fact, it's almost a ritual occurrence. At one of the points in the ritual, the then Minister of Health did in fact appoint a prosecutor from the Crown Attorney's office to the nursing homes branch who had a particular responsibility for dealing with cases that had prosecution as their response. I wonder if the Attorney General can tell us today precisely what is happening with respect to that office.
Minister?
Well, can I begin by saying to the Leader of the Opposition, there's a question. I mean, that's a question. And let me say to...
There you go, Larry.
No, that's about a 9.8. I mean, that's a meaningful, intelligible, shortly phrased, pointed question. That's what this is all about.
Order. Order. I hope we can have an answer in the same vein.
And what's more, the question has something to do with the public business of Ontario. Now, I'm aware that, as the honourable member says, that a prosecutor was assigned for the task that he described. I will make an inquiry today and attempt to provide a report at the earliest possible moment about the matters that the honourable member raised.
Supplementary?
Speaker, by way of supplementary, because of the Attorney General's lifelong interest in freedom of information, which interest will no doubt continue for the rest of his, we all hope, very long life, I'd like to ask the Attorney General a very simple question. While he is investigating that, perhaps he can explain the suppression of the Crittenden report by the Minister of Health, which was in the hands of the Minister of Health in March of 1986, which contained information which was critical, to put it mildly, of the operation of several nursing homes, which raised profound questions about the standard of care within the nursing home industry, to use the official phrase, and which was not released by the Minister of Health until 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon in the middle of September 1986. So while you're finding out where the prosecutor is who's supposed to be prosecuting cases that are involved, perhaps you can also find out why the Minister of Health suppressed information for 6 months relevant to the care of people who are living in our nursing homes.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the same question has been put to the Minister of Health from time to time in the House, and he's provided his answer with respect to the question. I will, however, undertake to bring the honourable member's concerns to his attention as soon as I can.
New question. The member for Mississauga East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a question for the Minister of Revenue. As the Minister will recall, he was asked yesterday if he would release individual assessment reports to the public and to the members of this House. In asking this question, my colleague, the member for Eglinton, expressed his concern for the financial implications this assessment process could bring to bear on a number of homeowners in the City of Toronto. For this reason, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask the Minister the same question. Why will he not release these individual assessment reports to the members of this legislature and to the very public which will be directly affected by their outcome?
Minister?
I would like to make public any information that's in the ministry that would be in the best interest of the community. And in this instance, it's the judgment of the officials in the Ministry of Revenue that if the property-by-property assessment impact were to be released, it would make a flood of appeals to the Assessment Review Board, which would, in fact, make the tax collection during the interim period really a chaotic situation. Now, when the officials of the municipalities concerned want to discuss this with our officials, we're quite pleased to talk about that because we're really thinking of the best interests of the municipalities concerned. Now, at the present time, when there is a motion by Metro Council, a resolution, accepting the concept of a reassessment at market value across the whole of the metro area, then we certainly want to cooperate in every way that is for the benefit of all concerned. Now, our rejection of that, of releasing that information in the past, has been on the basis of an understanding with the municipalities that it would not serve the taxpayers or the municipal councils, since we give all of that information in ranges and in geographic areas, but withhold the house-to-house information that you are requesting. All those matters can certainly be discussed, and if the municipalities want that information and understand the difficulties that it may create for them, we're prepared to give it consideration.
Order.
Well, Mr. Speaker,
Supplementary.
in this era of purported openness and accessibility that we hear so much about, I find it difficult to comprehend that these reports are not being made readily available to the ratepayers affected by them. As a matter of fact, the main difference, which is prompted by a question from, I think, the member from Mancini, when he said, why didn't you do it? And the reason I didn't do it is because we never had a request or a resolution passed by Metro Council. We have now, and that's the difference. The public has a right to know and to understand the contents and implication of these reports. Will the minister agree to release these reports immediately to enable both the public and the members of this House to see what the effects will be on properties and homes in this city?
The request is there. Mr. Speaker, what I've already agreed to with the Metropolitan Chairman is to sit down with him or his officials, with the officials of the ministry that the Honourable former Minister knows so well, and they're very competent people, and they can work out what is in the best interest of the municipalities and the ratepayers, and to move forward the prospect of this reassessment.
New question. The member for Hamilton East.
Serious question of the Minister of the Environment. Given the major story that appeared in yesterday's Hamilton Spectator concerning the alarming rate of absenteeism and illness amongst the workers at the Woodward Avenue sewage treatment plant in my riding, can the Minister give us a statement in this House which will identify the toxins that have been discovered in the plant? Can he tell us if the workers were exposed to PCBs and when those workers were informed that they were working with PCBs, and any other pertinent information as to the health situation in that plant?
Minister?
I appreciate the fact that the member has drawn this to the House's attention. As the member would be aware, the Minister of Labour has the jurisdiction over occupational health and safety, and I will want to discuss, because there is a peripheral involvement of the Ministry of the Environment in terms of the plant itself, but primarily the Minister of Labour will be addressing the issue of the exposure of any chemicals to the workers in that particular plant, and I know that the Minister of Labour will want to discuss that with me and in the House tomorrow, and I will certainly be pleased to indicate to him that you have asked that question and that you'll be looking for that information.
Supplementary.
Now that it's obvious, Mr. Minister, that we have a very serious health threat to sewage treatment workers across the province of Ontario, is the Minister prepared to see that there is ordered an immediate, comprehensive and independent health study of the workers in sewage treatment plants across the province of Ontario? And is the Minister also prepared to see that we will institute pre-treatment of all industrial waste so that we don't have the contaminants being dumped into the sewers by hundreds of plants in the province of Ontario?
Minister?
To the first half of the member's question, most certainly I think because of this report and others that have been forthcoming, it seems to me that such an assessment of the problem that exists in the various sewage treatment plants across the province would be a good idea. And in conjunction with the Minister of Health, who has an interest in that, but again, primarily with the Minister of Labour, I want to discuss that suggestion on the part of the member, which, as I say, this isn't an isolated incident, and so that's why it's important. In regard to his second question about pre-treatment, one of the aspects of the white paper, one of the reasons we put forward the white paper on the MISA program was to get the kind of input such as you're giving today and others have given to those discharges which wouldn't be directly into waterways but would be into sewage treatment plants. And we have had some good input from various sources on that. And I would tell the member that I am giving very serious consideration to finding a mechanism which would deal with those as efficiently, those discharges as efficiently as those going directly into waterways. And certainly pre-treatment is one of those options which I think is very viable.
New question? The member for York Centre.
Mr. Speaker, I have a question for the Minister of Community and Social Services. A question that has to deal with the housing needs of our province. We're talking today of thousands of Ontarians living in hostels, 12 to 14,000 people in Metro Toronto alone living in hostels. There are over 2,000 people in this province who are psychologically disabled who are living in boarding houses. We have hundreds of people, at least 200 in Toronto, who live in the streets, but they're in Ottawa and Windsor and Hamilton and other cities. We're talking about people that don't have walls or a roof or a hearth or a place to really call their own. So we're talking about a very serious housing crisis. What is the minister prepared to do to alleviate this growing housing crisis to provide affordable and supportive housing in Ontario?
Minister?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the honourable member is aware of the fact that, excuse me, that my ministry's shelter responsibility is with respect to emergency shelter, or such things as hostels, that the responsibility in this government for long-term permanent shelter for housing rests with my colleague, the Minister of Housing. And he has announced just very recently, over the last 3 or 4 weeks, an additional 3,000 units on top of the 6,700 units he announced earlier this year. Now, that's the two-phase program. The Minister of Housing is responsible for permanent housing. We are responsible for emergency housing. In Metro, for example, this year, there will be an addition in excess of 3,000 emergency beds. Part of the problem that we're having in large cities, such as Metro Toronto, is the significant number of people coming into this area from either Western Canada or Eastern Canada. Toronto Social Service just recently did a random access of 2,000 files, recent files, and they found that 1,300 of the 2,000 had come into the city over the last few weeks from either the east or the west. And, you know, they're doing their best with our assistance to keep up, but it's very difficult under those circumstances.
Supplementary?
Well, it not only is it difficult, it seems to be something you can't cope with, because neither the Minister of Housing nor the Minister of Community and Social Services have come together to try to solve the problem. When are you and the Minister of Housing going to come together and come up with a comprehensive housing policy that begins to address the needs of the people in our communities?
Mr. Speaker, for the first time in the history of this government that I'm aware of, the Minister of Housing is a member of the Social Policy Committee of Cabinet, as opposed to just the Resource Committee. In other words, housing is now seen in this government as a social need in addition to an economic need. So, in fact, we do work together. The second point, Mr. Speaker, is that there is regular consultation between the Ministry of Housing and my ministry as to the kind of long-term housing that's needed and the supportive mechanism from my ministry that will make it possible. Thirdly, Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Health and my ministry have just jointly announced, in consultation with the municipality of Metro Toronto, the Habitat program that will provide shelter and longer-term shelter, not short-term, for ex-psychiatric patients just coming out of psychiatric hospitals. There's a joint program between Toronto, the Ministry of Health, and the Ministry of Community and Social Services. So there are coordinated programs with health, there are coordinated programs with housing, but there's a long way to go.
New question. The member for Essex North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of the Environment. The Minister is no doubt aware that in December 1985, the Ministry of Labor shut down the composting operation at the Windsor West Sewage Treatment Plant because of a work refusal. And from December 1985 to September 1986, the city has been dumping sewage sludge in the Maidstone Township dump illegally. And after September 1986, the Ministry of the Environment granted the city an emergency permit to dump sewage sludge in the Maidstone Township dump. That permit has expired as of October the 31st. Will the minister please tell us why he has approved another emergency permit which would allow the city to continue to dump sewage sludge in the township of Maidstone?
Minister.
As the member would appreciate, there is a divided opinion on this if you look at the people who you represent in your constituency and those who are in Windsor. One of the difficulties, of course, is that the people of Windsor are concerned that if the sludge, for instance, were left in the plant, and that isn't an option, that it would spill over into the waterways. So that certainly is not an option. So it's a matter of determining where the sewage sludge can go, and at the present time, the only location that appears to be available, that appears to be acceptable, and it isn't the best of all worlds, I think the member would most certainly agree with me on that, is Maidstone, and there has been a limited extension to that. I think there was a hope that the occupational health and safety issue, and the member for Hamilton East alluded to problems that exist in this regard, but that the occupational health and safety issue could be resolved in order that the health of the workers could be protected at the same time the composting could be resumed. That has not been resolved to this point in time, but it's my understanding that there are sides working toward that particular end.
Supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the city, the Ministries of the Environment, and the Ministry of Labor have had a year to resolve this problem. Rather than making the necessary improvements in the plant, the problem has been transferred from the city and dumped onto the county. The city has already probably spent in the excess of $100,000 alone just trucking that sewage sludge out into the county. Will the minister stop the emergency permit and resolve the problem at the source, at the sewage treatment plant in the city of Windsor?
Minister?
But one of the difficulties that I encounter when I do that, of course, in conjunction with my colleague, the Minister of Labor, is do we place in jeopardy the health and safety of the workers who are working in the plant, the composting plant? And there's always a very great concern about that, so it's balanced off. I know that you would not want to have me place undue pressure on the Minister of Labor, for instance, to allow that operation to resume as it existed in the past. And so it's my view, and I know that Alderman Bouncel of Windsor has expressed his views on this matter, and is very concerned that the city have a location, at least on a temporary basis, to place its sludge. I don't think it's a long-term solution. I think the member would agree with me on that. We're attempting to resolve the occupational health and safety issue as quickly as possible, while at the same time protecting the workers in the area.
Order. Just before I recognize the next member for a question, I would like to inform all members that we have the former member for Lake Nipigon and the former Speaker of the House, Mr. Jack Stokes, in the lower gallery. The member for Scarborough Centre.
Mr. Speaker, I have a question for the Minister of Education. under Bill 75, minority language trustees were elected this fall to public school boards by both separate school ratepayers and public school ratepayers. However, these trustees will have to resign at the end of December when Bill 30 comes into effect because all of them were elected by separate school supporters and will no longer be eligible to remain on public boards. A second set of elections will have to be held. The minister's staff advised the boards on how to structure the elections this fall. Can the minister explain why his staff failed to warn the boards of this problem and failed to recommend ways to structure their elections to avoid the problem and actually approve election procedures which will create the problem?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, let me say that these elections across the province to establish the minority language educational councils have not been characterized by failure, but rather by enthusiasm and by commitment and by interest. And I just want to make the record speak very clearly to that reality. Mr. Speaker, I want to say to the honourable member that we recognize that there may be the rare situation where a second election is going to be required because as a result of the impact of Bill 30, not Bill 75, the trustees to which the honourable member made reference will drop away from the public boards as of the 31st of December 1986. Where that is the case, and we do not expect it to be a very frequent occurrence, that then there will be procedures in place to provide for new trustees early in 1987.
Supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Minister, you know that subsection 136.13 of Bill 30 states that if a member of the public board has been elected by a separate school supporter, they cannot remain on the public board. Mr. Minister, could you tell this House how many new elections you expect to see this January the 1st because of your incompetence and inability to deal with that problem?
Minister.
Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
Get out the book.
Surely.
Get out the book.
Surely it's an unkind cut of the honourable member for Scarborough Centre to suggest that in this historic initiative we in this government have been incompetent. We've been quite to the contrary. We've been very competent. We've been very concerned, and we've been very creative in meeting this important requirement of our charter and of our new constitution. Let me say to the honourable member that there is no separate school representative who has chosen the path to which the honourable member makes reference without knowing well in advance what the consequences would be as of the end of December 1986. So, Mr. Speaker, let me say to the member for Scarborough and his friend from Manotick, we have in the ministry taken extraordinary measures to inform not just the trustees, but all in the Ontario community. The answer to the question, Mr. Speaker, is I don't expect very many elections, and where they're necessary, they're going to take place, and they're going to be like the elections just completed. They're going to be done very well and with a great deal of interest.
New question? Order. The member for Lakeshore.
Mr. Speaker, I have a simple one-part question for the Minister of the Environment. He has heard today of concerns in sewage treatment plants from my colleagues from Hamilton East and Essex North. He's aware of similar problems in sewage treatment plants all across this province. I'd like to ask the Minister, does he agree that if the industries that now dump their wastes into municipal sewers were forced to treat those wastes before they dumped them, many of these problems could be resolved?
Hear, hear. Good question.
Minister, the one-part answer?
Yes.
Supplementary.
Being the case, Mr. Speaker, can the Minister please explain why his municipal industrial strategy for abatement does not regulate the 12,000 industries in this province that currently dump their waste into municipal sewers?
Minister?
Two things I would mention. This question was longer, so the answer will be longer in this case, Mr. Speaker. Two things I would mention in this regard. First of all, it's incorrect to say that those matters cannot be addressed. As the member would know, one of the options I mentioned was the option I mentioned to the member for Hamilton East of pre-treatment. Another was a bylaw which would apply across the province in various municipalities, which would involve those discharges going into the sewers in the province, and either one of those options is, of course, is viable. In addition to this, of course, the MISA program contemplates that the sewage treatment plants themselves must have a discharge which is acceptable, and therefore, of course, the municipalities would want to ensure in any event that the materials going in would be acceptable so they wouldn't encounter those problems in sewage treatment plants. But I also want to say to the member that the MESA program contemplates, the white paper contemplates, Mr. Speaker, representations made by various people and groups, and we're listening very carefully. As the member knows, we're always prepared to listen to her ideas, ideas from the Conservatives, and from everyone in the province.
Question, the member for Lincoln.
My questions to the Minister of Unction, the Attorney General. And it concerns the alleged suppression of information alluded to by the member for York South of the Crittenden report. I wonder, while the Minister is investigating that alleged suppression of information within the Ministry of Health, whether he might investigate the suppression of the Sam Ruth report, which is a compliance plan review board, which we understand has been in the Minister's hands since last June.
Minister?
To do that.
Supplementary. New question. The member for Ottawa Centre.
My question is to the Attorney General. The Minister seems to be launching out now in a great new area of social reform, the enforcement of access rights for non-custodial parents, who are usually fathers. But we still haven't seen hide nor hair of the maintenance enforcement reform, which principally affects children and mothers, which was approved by this legislature many months ago. Where is it?
Minister?
I said to the honourable member yesterday when I met her in the building, we are giving consideration to developing a mechanism that will make the enforcement of this act easier. We have had occasion to attend in Manitoba, which, as every honourable member knows, is nirvana for the honourable member and those associated with her, and have had the advantage of their suggestions about how the act can be made to work effectively. I found those very helpful, and we hope that the scheme will be better on that account.
Supplementary?
Mr. Speaker, I wonder if the Attorney General could explain to us why, when we were in committee discussion of this legislation, he suggested he would have his mechanism for enforcement in place by September. He's now telling us that it's May with lame excuses. And perhaps he might think of plugging into the very excellent system in Manitoba, since he thinks so highly of it.
Minister?
Well, that delay that the honourable member refers to has been occasioned because of the complexity of operating a system of the Manitoba type in a province that has as many centres of population as Ontario has, 8 or 10 times the number that exist in Manitoba. I thank the honourable member for her suggestion that we should plug into the Manitoba model. It's a good model, and we are relying on the experience they've had in Manitoba in order to make our system as good, if not better.
New question. The member for Mississauga South.
My question is for the Minister of Citizenship and Culture. As the Minister is aware, the Standing Committee on Regulations and Private Bills has been dealing with PR 7, which is a bill allowing the Huron County Council to become the library board and to disband the existing library board. The question that I have for the Minister is that in her letter dated October the 27th to the chairman of that committee, she says that, in referring to the Library Act, the Minister says, the Act does not provide for nor encourage the replacement of a public library board by a committee of council. My question would be, does the Minister consider now, in light of her later support in the letter for this particular bill, that the Library Act needs to be amended?
Minister?
No, I don't consider that it needs to be amended.
Supplementary?
Supplementary would be to the Minister, if she doesn't feel that the Act needs to be amended, then I have to ask her what is so different about Huron County than any other library board around this province, that in that case she seems to feel that she can support PR 7.
Minister?
Well, the Library Act, as it's presently constituted, allows for municipal councils and library boards to determine where the local issues lie. And I believe that is the extent to which this minister or this ministry can go. In all other cases, and I'm presuming also the case with the Huron Library, those issues have been dealt with. And so this does not indicate in my mind any necessity for revision to the Act itself. The Act has plenty of leeway for incorporating local concerns.
New question. The member for Scarborough West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Revenue. Mr. Minister, the Minister of Community and Social Services today failed to come through with anything substantial for the disabled in the province, and yesterday I was asking you a number of questions or raising concerns with you in your estimates, and nothing was forthcoming. I have a very specific request to make of you, and that is, have you considered and will you consider to make available to the disabled community of the province of Ontario the same thing as you do to the seniors of Ontario, and that is the property tax grant, which is not available to disabled people living in their own homes, especially since the value of the property tax grant has dropped from its initial $500 to being worth only $325 in $1980 today.
Mr. Speaker, I'll give that consideration, yes.
Supplementary?
Kind of you to consider it, Mr. Minister. How quickly do you think we could see that? Is it possible to get an announcement of that sort of thing before Rick Hansen leaves the province of Ontario? So again, we might leave something substantial in his wake instead of weeks named after him and townships named in his honor.
Treasurer?
Well, I'd be perhaps misleading if I indicated we could proceed that quickly. I'm sorry, I'm a little conservative in the way I respond. I think the community is responding very well to Rick Hansen's presence, and I understand he may even be in the gallery here tomorrow, and we're certainly looking forward to that.
Time for oral questions has expired.